This month is the first time ever that the USA has had an official language. The executive order was signed on March 1st, so this isn't a law. It's not in the US Code or the Constitution. So if you're a legal expert, let me know, does that really make it the official language? But it also revokes a previous executive order which guaranteed access to other languages. So things like this, where you see 4 different languages at a polling station on election day, might go away. Now it does say nobody's required to change anything they do. And elections are controlled by the state, not the federal government. But in a state like Texas, whose politicians are allied with the current administration, if the president wants everything to be in English and the state politicians agree, there's no longer any federal protection for these other languages. Some might argue if you go to France or Japan, you're expected to learn French and Japanese. Why wouldn't you be expected to learn English in the US? Until now, the US never had an official language. We don't all speak the same language. In the US, there are at least 8 languages with over 1 million speakers. That's a higher population than 9 European countries. There are more people who speak Spanish in the US than people who live in Spain. If you're going to move to these regions that speak Spanish, why should you learn English? Not to mention that also removes the protections of indigenous languages that are from this land. And France used to look like this in terms of languages. They only started speaking one language after centuries of extremely aggressive language policies, which often resulted in violence. And if you're learning Japanese, you're probably learning like a Tokyo dialect. But if you move anywhere else, that's not what they speak there. If you move to Okinawa, they speak a different language. Why would you learn Tokyo Japanese to go to Okinawa? Just because it's in Japan? The executive order mentions that since our founding, English has been used as the national language. But from the founding of our republic, from the Revolutionary War, we also had people who spoke Spanish, French, indigenous languages, African languages. People who spoke all those other languages fought for our independence. They've always been part of this country, and hundreds of indigenous languages that were here before English. It says it will empower new citizens to achieve the American dream. You don't need to speak English for the American dream. Chinese immigrants have like the best method of achieving the American dream. Chinese immigrants give jobs that help other Chinese immigrants come here, and they don't need to speak English. Miami is one of the wealthiest cities in the country, and they speak more Spanish than English there. Lots of wealthy, powerful countries have multiple languages. Should German-speaking Belgians assimilate to the French-speaking part because that's what's more common? Or should all of them assimilate to the Dutch-speaking part because that's the majority? What about Switzerland or Spain or our neighbor Canada? We have more people who speak Spanish than the population of all of these countries. Yet they still manage to support all these languages that only have a fraction of as many speakers. Why should people need to assimilate to your culture when the US has always had multiple cultures and languages for its entire history, some of which that have been here even longer than English? I don't think they should. I think the multilingualism of the US gives us a competitive advantage. The more languages we speak, the better we can compete in a global economy. Reducing protections for those languages does not help us keep up with the rest of the world.